Hello. This video we're going to look at English introductions. We're going to look at the basic structure and we're going to look at the first sentence of our introductions. So first let's think about the shape of an introduction, and by shape I mean the shape of the information. How much are we revealing each time? How specific are we being? So if we think of it as being this kind of shape, so a funnel, it's wide at the top and gets narrower and narrower until it's very narrow at the bottom. Now we can compare this shape to our introduction and the kind of information that we're giving. So at the top, it's very general. And then with each sentence, it gets more and more specific until we are extremely specific. And that final sentence is the most specific. It tells us exactly what the introduction is about, and it tells us what the whole essay is referring to, and it's very specific. So the first sentence is the hook, and the second sentence, at the last sentence, I should say, is the thesis statement. Okay, so we start off very general information, and we get more and more specific with each sentence until we're very specific with the final sentence of the introduction. Now, when we say start general, that doesn't mean we start in a boring way. Quite the opposite. So that first sentence is called the hook because it's there for grabbing your reader's attention. So imagine like you are fishing. We have a hook on the end of our line. We are trying to grab our reader to hook their mouth and bring them in like a fish. Okay, so it's about being interesting. So let's look at the main types of hook that we can start with. So the first sentence of the introduction, it can be a surprising or thought-provoking question, a fascinating fact or statistic, an intriguing statement, or a deep quotation. Now, notice that we've got some pretty vivid adjectives there. So deep, intriguing, fascinating, surprising, or thought-provoking. This is really important because the hook cannot be boring. The hook is to make your reader want to read what you have written. So it's got to be interesting. So let's look at some examples of these types and how we can be interesting. So first, a surprising or thought-provoking question. Now, just take a moment and read these 5 questions. I think hopefully you noticed that 2 of them are really not very thought-provoking or interesting or surprising. So firstly, have you ever taken a nice vacation? Well, really, the only answer to this is kind of, nah, yeah, of course, or no. But it's not really giving us the theme of the writing, and it's a pretty dull way to start. The other one is, do you know the subway? So this question, yes, it's general, but it's so general that it's beyond boring. Okay, and actually these 2 examples are real examples from that I've read in my education history. So yes, we're starting more general, but we still have to be interesting. So if we look at what doesn't Disney own these days, there's kind of a feeling of accusation there. So already it's starting off negative on Disney. Would you doubt someone who told you they had cancer? That's a surprising question. And it puts that idea, something you've probably never thought about, in your mind. If somebody told you, I have cancer, why would you doubt them? What reason would you have? So it's creating interest. Like, what is the writer going to tell me about this topic? And the last one, let's get a couple of things straight, shall we? It's a question, but it's a rhetorical question, meaning it doesn't actually expect you to think of an answer. And again, this is starting off kind of humorously in quite an aggressive way. So basically saying, I'm going to tell you some facts, right? And you might not agree, but I'm going to tell you. So that's a humorous one. I've put the link below. It's from a very, very good website called Cracked, which whilst it is more casual writing, it still follows the rules of English writing. It starts with a hook, and the first sentence and the first paragraph ends with a thesis statement. So that's questions. So don't be boring. Don't ask questions that are so general that the reader has no interest in what you're going to say. Also, don't ask questions that are so general that they don't really give you a sense of what is coming next. So next up, let's think about intriguing statements. Okay, so statements that make you want to know more. Again, most of these examples are from Cracked. So for the millionth time, companies are not your friend. So firstly, we're starting with some exaggeration, the millionth time. And the idea that companies are not your friends puts the idea in your mind of different kinds of advertising you might have seen. So again, it's a strong start, exaggeration, and we get a sense of what's coming next, right? We're going to think about companies. Maybe we're thinking about advertising or marketing or brand. So next, also from Cracked, movie theaters have never had it worse. Well, this is a good example that thesis statements don't need to be really long if they're making like a strong statement. So movie theaters have never had it worse. Well, again, it's making a very strong statement. Never had it worse. So meaning we are in the worst of times. So again, a hook does not have to be long. It just needs to have impact. Now, this is an interesting one. We're combining two things. We're combining a bit of humor, so dreaded words outside of the words hijacking. We also having some quite vivid language, some quite strong images, so like the word dreaded word. So it has a different feeling to the word fear or... So layover, it's something we've all experienced, or it's something that we all are aware of, very normal. But the hook starts with this humorous and quite strongly worded statement. Again, we get a sense of the theme of what is coming next. So when a massive global crisis changes your life, you kind of don't have a lot of tools to deal with it. So again, we can see this is from more casual writing with language like kind of. But again, we've got strong, vivid language like massive and crisis. And we're kind of addressing everybody. So it changes your life. Okay, we're addressing everybody though. It's the plural of you. And the idea of tools. Okay, so how do we deal with this crisis? So again, we've got a nice example of big, strong statement. It gives us an idea of the theme of the writing. And we've got some nice vivid language used in there. All right, so that's using statements. So yes, it's more general compared to the rest of the introduction, but that does not mean boring. So next, let's think about a fascinating fact or statement. And again, the key word there is fascinating. So let's look at some examples. So first one, around 25% of dreams blind people have are nightmares compared to only 6% of nightmares others have. So again, this is interesting. Probably not many people know this statistic. And it's directly linked to what the writing is about. Okay, so interesting. Maybe it's surprising. You've never thought about this kind of thing before. So we're starting with a shocking, surprising, fascinating statistic. According to the National Soft Drink Association, the annual consumption of soda by the US citizens is 600 cans. All right, so more than 1 can a day. You probably would not have guessed that number. So it's, again, starting with something surprising, a high number, and it's connected to the writing. So maybe the writing is about obesity or health or hidden calories, something like that. So even though we live in the 21st century, there are still around 3 billion people living in poverty. Again, this is a shocking number of people living in poverty. And again, it's giving that idea of, we think we live in the modern worlds in the 21st century. However, a lot of people are kind of not living in the 21st century with us. So again, we're using statistics and facts, but they've got to be interesting or shocking or surprising, or something that your reader has never thought about before. All right, next. A deep quotation. And again, the key word here is deep. So one thing I've noticed in years of reading essays is a lot of people want to use proverbs or sayings from their native language. One problem with that is your culture is embedded in that proverb or in that saying. And that cultural nuance, that cultural understanding does not necessarily translate well. So you may be translating the words, but the meaning in English might not be obvious to the reader. So it's something deeply culturally known to you, but it doesn't necessarily translate that well. So I would advise be cautious about using proverbs or sayings from your native language, or just avoid them altogether. But we can use quotations from influential people. For example, George Orwell wrote in Animal Farm that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. So we could start with something surprising like this, where it's a contradiction that you can be equal but more equal. So we can start with something like that, like a shocking quote. Maybe the essay is about inequality, or maybe hidden inequality. Or something like this. Chumbawamba once claimed, "I get knocked down, but I get up again. You are never going to keep me down." So this is kind of a joke, right? We've taken some song lyrics from a kind of pop rock band from the 90s, and we're kind of presenting it as a serious literary quote. So we could start off with something fun like this. Whatever it is, make it interesting, make it relevant, and make it understandable to the reader. Okay, the reader should not be scratching their head at the end of that quote going, "What was that about?" So, the four main types of hooks: we have surprising, thought-provoking questions, we have fascinating facts or statements, we have intriguing statements, deep quotations, but basically the most important thing is be interesting. Okay, grab your reader's attention and make them want to know more. All right, thanks for listening.